Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Over the past month, different opinion polls have been conducted by several organizations to predict the results of the presidential elections billed for February 16th. While there have been varying results on the outcome of who will lead at the polls, one thing that is certain across the board is that there are two main contenders: President Muhammadu Buhari of the APC and Atiku Abubakar of the PDP. President Buhari's advocates are basing their support of him on continuity, fight against corruption, integrity, and security. And support for Atiku is based on a better economy, better governance, past political records, and restructuring. Joining us now for a pre-election analysis of the political gladiators is political analyst Dr. Sam Amadi. Welcome to the morning show.
Thank you. Good morning.
So it's said that opinion polls don't win elections, social media doesn't win election, rallies don't win election. My question for you is, what does win elections?
Well, it depends on what political climate. In Nigeria, what wins election, three things in my view. First is structure on the ground. So because we run a prebendal politics, which means political actions are based on patronage. So if you have the heavy lifters in the constituencies, in the wards, and all that, then you have a chance of winning. The other thing that wins election in Nigeria is also momentum. Who can raise the voters out? You know, can you raise their base? And that's why so somebody like the incumbent is playing on his corruption mantra, and of course the main challenger, Atiku Abubakar, is playing on the economy, because most of his supporters are those who first understand the importance of economy, and those who have made the choice that economic growth is perhaps more important than fighting corruption. So ability to mobilize their base by rhetoric, by other symbolism is critical. And finally, it's in the Nigerian system, very awkwardly, it's ability to manage the security and the INEC structures for yourself. So that could be a little bit manipulative, but that's real. So those three factors are very important to situate victory in Nigerian politics.
So really, how do we measure that momentum you talked about? Because you look at the campaign rallies and you see these crowds. And in recent times, we've heard political actors discountenance and discredit crowds. They're trying to outdo each other. Yes, they don't win elections. How do we measure that momentum you have talked about? Because we have barely 3 days to go to the elections.
Well, how you measure a crowd is indication of capacity on the ground, because to raise a crowd, whether you buy them, you bus them from their communities to come to the stadium, it requires structure on the ground, it requires financing, shows you have people, agents who can go and get this people out. So you can't discount crowd totally, but what people say is that the same crowd that they hire might be the same crowd Mr. B comes and hires the next day. But then the question is, the crowd tells us that you have capacity. And secondly, it shapes narrative, it shapes perception. If people look at those crowds, there's a sense in which political parties create a fait accompli. If you listen to APC, they will say, even the PDP has considered that their candidate will win. If you listen to the PDP, they create the sense of inevitability. And knowing that Nigerians like bandwagon, we don't want to be left out in the other coach, everybody's moving to the other coach. So the idea here is that the crowd can tell us, look, this is a done deal. This man will win. Why don't you sign up? But again, on the lighter mode is that these crowds, the point about the crowd is also the messaging. These guys, you expect that a political campaign will be opportunity to pass a message, but it ends up being about songs, about waving flag and being settled. So people can argue. After the crowd, do you still have people who follow up door to door, word by word? Especially 2-3 days to election in Nigeria is when the election is won and lost, because that's when you have their polling agents, and if you get the wrong ones, they could be bought over. That's when you begin to do the last-minute touch with voters who are likely to change their mind, depending on inducement, depending also on perhaps what the big man in the community finally says. I know people have called me from my village saying, who shall we vote? And I say, maybe after today. So that means we still run that kind of clientelist business where people call their patron, those who pay their school fees, those who attend funerals, and say, where do we vote? So after the big campaign, the big rally, then you have to put full soldiers on the ground to follow up, to ensure that the structure, there's no leakages. So I think the last 3 days are critical. You finalize your plan, you put people on the street, you try to talk about agents, which is very important, INEC agents. You want to have your people right there at every ward, looking through the ballot papers and ensuring that your voters are kept online. Some sign languages, people know where they're going to vote. So these are very important in Nigerian politics.
Okay, Dr. Amadi, you talked about the messaging, because I was about asking you whether the candidates were able to convey their message at their rallies, but you seem to have an opinion on that already. Now, the other aspect where Nigerians actually came close to assessing these candidates will have been the debates. No face-to-face debate among the major candidates. But there was town hall meeting. Can you say Nigerians pick something from the town hall meetings the major candidates had, which was aired live on TV?
Well, no. You see, a debate between the candidates actually is the best setting for enlightened voters, those who really want to vote in a rational sense, to make up their mind. Why? A town hall meeting, especially the ones they're having, is with a constituency defined, and you're coming there to pass a message, and you don't have the other person contradict. What we lost and what is not happening, in this campaign, we're not hearing the details of what to be done, because you need closer monitoring, face-to-face, for people to bring out those details. So if Atiku Abubakar and Buhari, the president, had debated among themselves, it's an opportunity for perhaps the president to interrogate Atiku's so-called corruption record. It's an opportunity for Atiku himself to challenge the president's so-called credibility. So essentially, you need adversariness. You need the other party who has a stake, incentive to push you, to press, and to pin you down. You don't expect the moderator of a debate where you're not there to be the one who will raise those questions against. No, the incentive is on the candidate, especially the incumbent and the contender. They have the incentive to even fling muds at each other, to derobe each other, and that's critical for this election. But the missing point is that the messaging are messages that are echo chamber. They are re-echoing sound bites of different campaigns. And because there are in campaign rallies, in town halls or whatever, you are passing a message and there's nobody to counter those messages. So I think really that this year's campaign lacks sufficient focus on messaging. In the last campaign, we knew what APC stood for, and PDP was defending their record. In this campaign, the APC is not even defending their record as such. They are actually saying, you know, this candidate is not a good option. And the PDP on their own is talking bogusly and bigotiously about making Nigeria work. In their campaign, in their documents, perhaps they had some detail, but in their campaign, really, they're not bringing out those details. So they spend 10, 15 minutes of this campaign abusing each other, and then the rest of that campaign, perhaps raising flags, and then the people move out and hail, and then the social media are awash with pictures. So really, the electorates, those who want to vote on basis of assessment, got a short shrift. Those who got big were those who already made up their mind and who just needed to be in the festive mood of campaigns, basically.
If I get you correctly, are you not, about your assessment of debates, are you not saying Atiku is justified by walking away from the debate arena when he discovered that the president, the incumbent, was not there?
Yes, I think I didn't fault Atiku much, because really, Atiku, the person Atiku is fighting against is the incumbent. Let's give respect to the other candidates, but essentially they're not coming to win this election. And even if they were coming to win the election, they are all winning against the major candidate, which is the president of the country. So Atiku coming there would have been, perhaps those who argue he should have been there are saying, look, perhaps there are these cynical guys in the room who don't have a high view of you. Perhaps you want to seal the deal with these guys. Forget the challenger. But the risk Atiku would have run in that election is that these other guys who have known to lose could spring a surprise, and then any punch given to Atiku, any uppercut, strong punch, it will be very let out, because there is no Buhari. Atiku needs a Buhari to make a comparison. If he doesn't have Buhari in the room, then even his brilliance goes to no issue because he is really contending against Mr. President. And so that debate that the president skipped could have given the electorates a great opportunity to probably see the real thing about each of the candidates, the two major candidates. But of course, if I was advising the Buhari team, I would, of course, it's a better loss. You can mitigate, it's less loss being not attending that debate and coming there, and the kind of things we hear in the campaign trail wouldn't be nice on a debate. So I think perhaps they made the right strategic decision. Atiku also made the right strategic decision in that context.
All right, Dr. Amadi, since you've been talking about the debate, the election debate, or rather the presidential debate, a lot of people usually say that that's why there is a debate, so that the undecided voters will be able to see reasons with different candidates on who to actually vote for. Going into the elections, they are saying that there are more undecided voters going into the 2019 elections than ever before. Which of these candidates do you think has done more than enough to convince those undecided voters to either vote for or against the other?
Obviously, I think Atiku has done better than the incumbent for two reasons. One, if you look at, there's also communication eroders. When a president misspeaks, everybody knows that, look, presidency or leadership is not about speaking English, but it works in public glare badly if you misspeak. If you get your, even in the US, when presidential aspirants get their tenses wrong, it has a disproportionate impact on consciousness. It frames a sense in which voters think this president is not smart enough. And no matter how much we deplore the Harvard, the Yale, the smartness, the smart kids, we still think that smartness matters. So essentially, the president has not done very well in the campaign to win undecided voters. The president has done perhaps well to motivate his base. So the question of the president's frailty, health issues, or intellectual capability, going on the trail, I think he's done a great job. Almost 36 states of the Federation, this really shows energy on the part of the president. But the fact that in some of those instances there were errors of miscalculation, errors of communication, or even handing flag to wrong persons or calling out wrong names, eroded the brand with uncommitted voters. Atiku has done very well in terms of the messaging he has put across. He has also, Obi, the running-mate VP, has been very strong in terms of focus groups, small meetings with business communities. So I think they have communicated their message stronger. The problem is this. Will this message lead to votes? Because essentially, you see, Nigerians are not able to translate the idea that they are poor to economic policy making, which is what is actually the cause of it. They are more likely, some Nigerians are more likely to still go back the fetish thinking or sentimental thinking that corruption 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago led to this joblessness. So it's difficult to pass across to Nigerians. Economic messaging is difficult in this country because it relies on some kind of factualness, factoid. Yeah, there's a fact behind this. Causality, you trace something linked to another. But the idea of corruption is a strong message in this country. The idea that people are corrupt because we believe people are corrupt. In fact, we exaggerate our corruption. So the messaging on corruption, I think, has stronger reverberation with some of our people. And so you'll be surprised that in spite of Atiku's stronger messaging, in spite of Atiku's stronger communication plan and strength, that the voters may move otherwise. Why? Because our level of rationality still is not strong enough to comprehend some kind of scientific, economic, database analysis. And perhaps we like all those generalizations. Oh, poverty has done this. Oh, corruption has caused this. And so, inevitably, you might get back to seeing that Atiku's messaging does not give him too much margin of advantage in this contest.
Still on Atiku Abubakar's messaging, as the main contender, he's running on promises, whereas the incumbents will be running on achievements. But he's also in a unique position of also having to run on past achievements, considering that we were led by PDP for 16 years and he played a leading role for 8 years. Yet at yesterday's rally in Lagos, Atiku Abubakar said that the APC cannot be trusted. Has he been able to demonstrate that PDP can?
That's the real problem. This election should have been over with some kind of unfortunate tragic errors of the APC is the disorderliness everywhere. But the problem, what's keeping APC in this race is PDP, surprisingly and ironically, because the PDP for 40 years, 60 years in power is a controversial legacy. You know, some people who are, again, the elites, the professionals, can understand issues around the regulatory framework. The PDP gave us, the EFCC, they gave us the NDDC, they gave us pretty much of what this government is running on. People can, the elites and those who think in that sense can understand PDP's structured reform in terms of probity and transparency, the fiscal policies. But really, people end up saying, oh, Desiani. People end up saying, oh, Dasuki. And all those, you know, salacious reports about corruption. So at the end of the day, when PDP is defending its legacy, which is pretty strong in some sense, especially in the infrastructure and economic sense, policy making, it doesn't catch traction much with ordinary Nigerians because the other noise, you know, is about noise and signal. The other noise about corruption seem to drown out the signals that is coming out from this communication. That's a problem they have. And so if you ask me, I don't think they have sealed the deal because people, and the PDP did not start dealing with the issue of corruption early enough. Even managing the messaging and also pushing back, showing that this government is really corrupt. I think it has not come out strong to show. And by the way, the difficult thing about corruption is that when you say, yeah, corruption is bigger than my corruption, it's really not a positive communication. So I think PDP, this election will tell us how much corruption is more of an electoral issue than even poverty. Interestingly, if you look at the polls, people are more concerned about unemployment, joblessness in their rational classification of their needs. But in their political behavior, the psychology of voting, they seem to be more drawn away by rhetoric around corruption. And so within this election, if people are thinking more rational in terms of what they think is their need, then they will be guided by a concern for economic issues, for joblessness, which I think the PDP has shown a stronger messaging and social capability over the years of the PDP, than the APC in terms of economic policy making. But if they are overwhelmed by their psychology, then you see them actually ending up focusing on corruption. So that's really what it's all about. I believe that the PDP has not really sealed the deal. That 16 years of more than modest achievement is also a drag on the candidate. In fact, this is an election, perhaps, a totally new candidate who has no history of work in the public service, mounting the PDP structure with strong messaging. A Kingsley Moghalu, if he comes from the right region of the country, would perhaps be a stronger candidate because there will be no noise. There will be no noise. The signal will be clear because in the last 3 to 4 years, APC government has failed to achieve its own objectives clearly. But comparative to PDP's 40 years, some people say, do you want to go back to Egypt? And these are important rhetorics in election because political behavior is more of psychology than, you know, social science. It's more of psychology than economics. People are going to react more to those symbolism, those noise in their brain than to a spreadsheet or data in their calculator. Very
quickly, let me ask you 2 questions based on what you've said. Is it too late to have a surprise third force in these elections? From what you have said, now a candidate like Kingsley Moghalu and there are others like him. Is it too late to spring a surprise for the major parties? And we would talk about corruption so much on the campaign trails. President Muhammadu Buhari, in the last couple of days, has made the issue of the $16 billion spent on power a campaign talk. You know, he says the PDP has spent $16 billion, in their own words, on power, and that Nigerians are the ones who can tell if the power came or not. You were the former chairman of the NERC during some of those 16 years. You were insider. Do you sort of acknowledge what the APC is pushing? Do you agree with that submission that, you know, we spent so much on power and we didn't have anything to show for it? Can you tell us what exactly happened?
Well, I think let's start with that. I think it's, of course, not true, half true. Once in a radio, a TV show I was watching, and I sent a text to the moderator. I said, this is lie. First and foremost, that 16 billion was the figure that the former chairman of the House Committee, Elumelu panel, and of course was not forensic at all. It was not accurate. They just, typical of House of Reps and the National Assembly, they bandy about figures. Even while Obasanjo was in power, I think under Jonathan, the Accountant General came out with reports. It was far less than 16 billion. That's first falsehood. Second is it's not wasted. Of course, political rhetoric is wasted. You can say it because it's campaign. But if you look at everything that the APC can achieve in power and some of the modest achievements that they've been reporting, they are basically built around what PDP did. See, I've always said that we should depoliticize electricity. The APC in the last 3.5 years have done nothing significant in qualitative in any way. They are just running on the grid set up by the PDP government the last 16 years. And by the way, I'm not even saying that because when I was in power for 5 years, 16 billion had already crystallized. It wasn't part of us. It was because from the time we took over and privatization, government has made little investment in the value chain of electricity supply. But the point remains, when I was in power, I had a debate with Lai Mohammed, and he was talking about 8,000 megawatts power in the next few months. I said, how are you going to do it? Well, he now acknowledges, well, there are some plants PDP has built that needs a little bit of cranking, a little bit of more project management. So anywhere that power has come into this sector in the last 3 years has been places that have been already built or about to be completed. And that doesn't take away what APC may have done in terms of improving the probity in the sector, perhaps improving project management. And that's how government is. If you come into a new government comes in, they look at what has not been done well and take it from there. But it's really falsehood to say that PDP 60 years was a waste. PDP 60 years was a mixed grill. First, they did infrastructure well. The plan that they are running today, the so-called National Electric Power Policy, was set up in 2000 by the PDP. The electric power sector reform, that's now the driver of this of power sector reform, was the PDP. The principal roadmap on power, PDP. And the APC government, I can tell you, has not made 2% deviation from the grid set up in terms of both policy grid and infrastructure grid set up by the PDP. And that's expected. Government's about continuity. So I think, but in politics, everything is fair, you know. So it's good for them to frame PDP 60 years as a wasted 16 billion. That's not true from a factual and any sense of proper monitoring and evaluation. But it's campaign. So I would say zero. Now, back to the issue of Kingsley Moghalu. I think that the problem with Kingsley Moghalu outside the two major parties is that no matter how flowery your language, no matter the competence you show, politics everywhere, and more so in Nigeria, is about what we call muzzle. You know, there are different forms of power. The most predominant is muzzle, resources, people. Also, messaging and brand is important. So you can't put a brand, a message on a structure that has no muzzle. And so I would have argued that that's why when I wanted to run for governor of Imo State, in spite of so many people thinking I'm a good candidate, I have to go to APGA, which had structure in that state before we pulled out. So if Kingsley had contested the primary in PDP or APC, or if the other parties had come together and built a strong third party, then because people are risk-averse. They want to see a candidate, and they said, I waste my vote. And it becomes a fait accompli. Everybody says, he will not win, he will not win, he will not win. People like us who think is better than any of the two major candidates may still not vote for him because we want our vote to count. So there's a sense in which Nigerian voters are more like, you know, people who tag on. So if the perception is that you don't have the capacity to win the election, because you don't even have a state branch that is meaningful in up to 20% of the state. So how are you going to win? How are you going to raise every party member in all the wards in this country? How will you have your men and women pool resources, not just financing, but also go footwork and meet voters and canvass? So essentially, Kingsley has won the beauty contest, but the real victory will elude him. And so I would say if somebody like Kingsley was a candidate of PDP, then he would have erased those 14 years or 16 years of failure. He would have removed the whole lot, the noise around corruption, the noise around, oh, you were chairman of, you were head of privatization, I gave to your friends. Those brand eroders are very important in the psychology of election. And I just wish it doesn't play big against the main challenger in this election.
Okay, Dr. Amadi, you seem to have placed so much premium on messaging, which is more or less an elite phenomenon. You seem to be underplaying the place of the well-being of the average Nigerian. Is it better off today than it was in 2015? Security, where people have felt the brunt of insecurity, which was not in their area, i.e. the Middle Belt, Zamfara. In 2015, we have that now, and people felt the brunt of these security breaches. You seem to be underplaying that. Are they not going to count in this election?
I think that's a very good point you raise. If you listen to me carefully, initially I made a point. I said, look, ordinarily, what should drive this election is well-being. And very powerful. The contrast is clear. People are worse off by any objective assessment. If you look at security, okay, by the way, you saw the a group of generals, about 75 of them or thereabout, coming out, retired generals, endorsing Mr. President. And Marwa, former Lagos State governor, who read the speech, who led the team, said clearly that you have dealt with security. There are no more bombs. I say, what? So the point I'm trying to make is that, look, we're not a people who are clear-minded and face the fact that what caused our condition is failure of policy in the last 3 to 4 years. We're people who mystify the story and relate it back to what is not real and say, oh, because the people stole the money. So this government has not had an objective assessment. Because if you have to be objective to assess this government, you will say, Mr. President, this is the state of security. This is what you promised. Look at the Chibok girls. Up to now, they're not all out. Look at Liera, Shayub. These are indicators of insecurity. But it's not playing big. You'll be surprised. All those people come out of those rallies, are they not people, if it was more developed, a place where people relate their condition to real factors, people will not be coming out to those to fill those stadia with all those thousands or millions of people. So the point I'm making is that ordinarily, are you better off today than you were before? It's always the mantra of a challenger in developed countries. It's very simple. It doesn't matter your good intention. The scorecard saves you or damages you. But in Nigeria, the scorecard is not working. People are still talking about, oh, this man means well. Oh, this man, we can't trust him. So the point I'm making, I'm not playing down the factor. I'm saying among the elites, and perhaps the undecided voters are actually people who are rational, because otherwise they could have decided by sentiment, by ethnic affiliations, or by religious affiliation, but they're undecided. They're waiting for more facts to come in. So this messaging around economic development, policy, welfare, security is good, because it's targeted at those people who are still looking at the figures and making up their mind who can do a better job of the economy, who can create more jobs, who can improve the economy. And in this debate, really, is the candidate of the PDP that has shown both a history, because the incumbent seeks or rises with the record they've achieved. The advantage of a challenger is that you can, just like APC had in 2014, they could promise anything, because it's still possible that they can deliver. But the guy who is on the seat promises nothing. You just have to say what you've done. But in Nigeria, people who are on the seat are still promising, and people are believing. And people are asking, man, if we couldn't do it in the last 3 to 4 years, give us what is changing. And by the way, APC is not talking about, oh, we're going to change our personnel, we made a mistake with hiring of people. They are just saying, look, we'll do a better job. How? No. So my comment is that I'm critiquing the methodology of our elections and critiquing our rationality. We are not feeling this sense of we're not responding rationally in terms of our condition. We are rather responding irrationally by perhaps hanging on to sentiments or some symbolism. That's why I call it noise. So yes, I think that ordinarily this election should be sealed on are you better off now than 5 years ago. But today, the incumbent president is still in the race strongly because the arguments are not rational.
All right, Doctor.
The voting will be more of head mentality. All right,
Dr. Amadi, very quickly, I have two questions. Let me see how we can actually wrap this one quickly. First of all, will they not, talking about those particular voters, will they not respond to all this with their PVCs on election day by actually voting? And also, I would like to actually find out from you, what do you think, how would you assess the role of the international community in this particular election? Because certainly there have been allegations, counter-allegations being made against the U.S. ambassador, talking about Stuart Smeaton, about his role in probably tactically supporting Atiku Abubakar. So first of all, don't you think that these people will actually respond with their PVCs on the day by voting? And also, give us your take on the international community and the role they've actually played. Quickly, by the way.
Well, I think we're going to see significant voter turnout. It looks like people are energized and they'll vote. My worry is what will be in their mind when they're casting their vote. Is it going to be a rational reflection on what has happened the last 4 years and perhaps the capabilities of both parties to serve their interests, or will it be some kind of they are captive to a sentiment or an idea? Whichever, I don't know. But I will predict from what I've seen and what I know that the psychology of election will crowd out the economics of election on voter day. Now, the issue of the diplomatic row, if you like, I think the problem with the government is that some people who are not skilled communicating. Look at the approach of the foreign ministry. I was a special advisor once there. The foreign ministry, in a normal way, issue a statement, look, we don't want interference in domestic affairs, end of it. So far, the international community has acted within the normal way of acting. The American ambassador has done nothing extraordinary. They always say, look, we want elections to be free and fair. We're going to hold people accountable who instigate violence. And by the way, Nigeria constitutes a significant part of the architecture of security in Africa and West Africa. And the crisis that can hit Nigeria will unstable, will destabilize the Sahel and all part of Africa. So it's in their own interest, strategic interest, also to be concerned about this election. And there are also so many signs that, look, this election could be problematic. And so they have done the right thing to issue strong message. And I think they should even be stronger in monitoring. And somebody says you observe, they should monitor. Because at the end of the day, this election may or may not go into a big controversy. And so the international community will play a strong role to moderate outcomes. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sam Amadi, for your analysis.